Welcome back, everyone. Now that you've hopefully got noteworthy information down, we are going to move on to the last part of our note-taking process, which is paraphrasing. We've done a bit of paraphrasing before in class, and you've probably got an idea of what that means, but it's a really important skill, so we're going to take a bit of time to really go over how to paraphrase effectively. So to go back to our old pieces, last time we talked about copying the web URL. We talked about getting noteworthy information that you're welcome to just copy and paste directly from your source. You know that this isn't your own words. Now we're going to look at paraphrasing, putting it into your own words so that you can use it in your own work without stealing from the people who originally came up with these ideas. The key here is to paraphrase, not plagiarize. If you just copy and paste, you are plagiarizing. You are stealing someone else's work. You're not contributing anything to the conversation just by pasting it somewhere else. So what you want to do is learn what they're saying, and then instead of copying it, use that information for you to write your own idea. So plagiarism is taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as your own. You can imagine how frustrating it would be if you came up with a really great idea. You wrote an awesome paper or you wrote an awesome song, and someone else came along and started saying it was theirs and they'd come up with it all on their own. That's what plagiarism is. There are also serious consequences for plagiarism. In high school, usually what's going to happen is you're going to get no credit for the assignment. You might need to redo it. If there are multiple instances of plagiarism, you might get a referral to a principal. Outside of high school, the consequences get a lot bigger. You can potentially lose a scholarship. You can lose credit for a high school or college course. You can lose your entire position in college or even more in a job if you try to pass something off as your own. And there can even potentially be legal consequences. You never want to be in that position, so don't plagiarize. So what do we do instead? We paraphrase. Instead of just copy and pasting, you're using your own words to say the same general thing based on what you've learned. We're going to go over what that looks like in a moment, but before we get to the example, here are some basic tips. Keep the facts, the numbers, the names, and sometimes the key phrases. You're not changing the statistics, the information that is just set in stone. Keep that, that's fine. If you're keeping key phrases, make sure to put them in quotation marks so it's clear that this was not your own writing. You don't need to do that for things like numbers and names. Those can just be written normally. Make sure you understand the original information. Your paraphrase has to still have the same meaning. If you drastically change the meaning, you're just making up your own stuff. So make sure you read it carefully and understand it. Once you have an idea of what the quote is saying, my recommendation is to look away and say, don't look at the original quote, close your computer, close your eyes, and imagine you were summarizing what you had read a moment ago to someone who was interested in the topic. You're not going to remember the whole thing word for word, but that's exactly the point. You'll remember the important parts and say it in your own words. But because this is a school assignment, you do want to make sure you're using academic language. Don't be too casual, like, oh, this kind of shows that I think that. Nah, cut all that out, get straight to the point. So what does this actually look like? Here's another example of good evidence, noteworthy evidence from our last presentation. This supports the point, it has lots of details and statistics, does a great job at making an argument. So if I was reading over this, okay, investigation, high-capacity magazines, used in a lot of shootings, I want to read over it, make sure I understand it, and then I'm going to look away and say, Alright, it's gone. If I was putting this in my own words based just on what I remember, I'd say something like this. High-capacity magazines were part of more than half of mass shootings in the study. Mass shootings involving high-capacity magazines also were worse than other shootings, with a much higher death and injury rate. So, this summary's already actually pretty good. It keeps the same message as the original noteworthy information. It's in my own words. It is missing the precise details. Half of mass shootings involved in the study. What study? They were much worse. What was the higher death and injury rate? Of course, I didn't memorize that. So, let me move myself out of the way here. Once you have your look away and say in your own words, you want to go ahead and finish with the details from your original quote. Look back at that first one, you're allowed to now, and add those back in. So again, let's see what that looks like. So on the left we have our original quote, on the right was my look away and say, and you can see I did a decent job. I definitely have the general idea of what it was talking about, but I'm missing those details that I've highlighted in the left. So let's just add those in. Now we've got a finalized paraphrase. It has all of the information we need, but it's clearly in my own words. I just added in the details from the original. If you can do something like this, you've got a really effective paraphrase. Before we move on and you have a chance to practice your own paraphrasing, I just want to quickly touch on how the notes will be graded when you turn them in, probably next week, depending on when you're watching this video. Remember that the notes are a summative assignment. They're smaller than our usual summatives, but they will still count as a summative grade. One big criterion we're looking at is analyzing the ideas and arguments you come up with. In particular, we're looking to see that your notes are clear, they're full of noteworthy evidence, not common knowledge or unrelated ideas, and they're specific. They include facts, statistics, examples, quotations from experts, things that are worth reading about. Another criterion we're looking at is producing text, and this is where the paraphrasing comes in. We want to see that your paraphrases capture the original meaning of the quote. You're not just making something up that's completely different. We want to see that it's in your own words, not the words of the article, and we want to see that you're putting some thought into putting it in academic English, not slang. So let's go back to our example here. Make sure you read over the example, understand how paraphrasing works, and then just like you will with your actual paraphrasing, go and try it out yourself. Take a look at your notes and start adding paraphrasing to your third column based on that noteworthy information you had.